"She's in here," the girl said, touching the rusty chest, but when they open it, they find something unexpected. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain beat against the windows of the colonial mansion like desperate fists begging for shelter. Liam Vance adjusted his reading glasses and sighed, watching the storm through the fogged pane of his private study. At 52, the businessman had turned his family inheritance into a furniture empire that dominated all of rural New England. But on that March afternoon, something was disturbing his meticulous routine. It was 7 in the evening when the doorbell echoed through the empty house. Liam frowned. He never received unannounced visitors. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, decorated with ancestral portraits, as he headed to the main gate. What he found on the other side left him completely stunned. A small girl, no more than 4 years old, was soaked under the torrential rain. Her dark hair clung to her thin face, and her brown eyes shone with an intensity that belied her age. She wore simple, tattered clothes, clearly inadequate for the cold weather. "Please, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "I need to come in. She is calling." Liam hesitated. For years, he had kept his distance from any situation that could complicate his orderly life. Since losing his wife Claire a decade ago in an accident he preferred not to remember, he had progressively isolated himself from the outside world. Still, he couldn't leave a child in that storm. "Come in," he said, opening the gate. "What's your name?" "Isabella," she answered, walking with a strange confidence for someone so small. "Isabella Stone." Liam led her into the mansion, noticing how she observed every detail with meticulous attention. The house had been transformed into a kind of private museum filled with antiques that had belonged to the Vance family for generations. Colonial furniture, oil paintings, silver candelabras. Everything preserved exactly as his father, Theodore Vance, had left it before passing away 5 years ago. "Do you live here alone?" Isabella asked, drying her face with the towel Liam had offered her. "Yes. And you? Where are your parents?" The girl's eyes filled with tears for a moment, but she quickly composed herself. "I don't have parents anymore. I live on the streets of the town." Liam felt a pang in his chest. Oakhaven was a small town, and he knew most of the families in need through his company. How did he not know about an orphan child wandering the streets? "Are you hungry?" he offered, guiding her to the kitchen. While preparing a simple sandwich, Liam watched Isabella explore the house with growing curiosity. She stopped before each portrait, as if searching for someone specific. When they reached the main hall, the girl froze completely. In the corner of the room, almost hidden behind a heavy curtain, was an old wooden chest. It was a piece Liam had always ignored. According to his father, it had been locked for decades and contained only unimportant old documents. The chest was covered in a dark patina that could be age or something else. "She's in here," Isabella whispered, pointing directly at the chest. A chill ran down Liam's spine. "What did you say?" "The lady who was calling me. She's in here and wants to get out." The certainty in the child's voice was disturbing. How could she know about that chest? Liam had never told anyone about it, and he didn't even know exactly what it contained. "Isabella, that's just an old chest. There's no one in there." But the girl approached the object with determination, placing her small hands on the stained wood. "She says her name is Eleonora. Eleonora Vance." The name hit Liam like a bolt of lightning. Eleonora was his great-grandmother, a woman he knew almost nothing about, except that she had mysteriously disappeared decades ago. His father had always avoided talking about her, changing the subject whenever her name was mentioned. "How do you know that name?" he asked, his voice trembling. "She told me. She said she's tired of being hidden and that you need to know the truth about your family. Liam sat down heavily in an armchair, trying to process what was happening. There was something deeply wrong with this situation. A 4-year-old child shouldn't know the names of people who died before her parents were even born. Isabella, where did you really learn about Eleonora? The girl turned to him, and for a moment her eyes seemed to hold an ancient wisdom that didn't match her childish appearance. I didn't learn it, Mr. Liam. I've always known. As long as I can remember, she talks to me in my dreams. She told me about this house, about you, about what's hidden here. Liam's heart raced. He had never told the girl his name. How did she know who he was? You need to open the chest, Isabella continued, turning her attention back to the object. She said that's the only way you'll understand why your family has always had so much success. The last word was spoken with a strange, almost bitter tone, unsuited for a child. Liam stood up, approaching the chest with growing apprehension. He had spent his entire life respecting his father's orders to never touch that object, but now he felt an irresistible compulsion to uncover its secrets. If I open this chest, he said slowly, will you promise to tell me the truth about how you got here? Isabella nodded gravely. I promise. But prepare yourself, Mr. Liam. Some truths hurt more than lies. With trembling hands, Liam approached the old lock. The metal was corroded by time, but still sturdy. He would need a tool to force it. As he searched for a screwdriver in the garage, his mind buzzed with unanswerable questions. When he returned to the hall, he found Isabella sitting on the floor beside the chest, humming a tune he vaguely recognized, something his mother used to hum when he was a child, before she left without explanation when he was only 8. The lock gave way, with a dry snap that echoed through the silent room. Liam hesitated for a moment before lifting the heavy lid. What he found inside would change his life forever. The silence that followed was deafening. Inside the chest, wrapped in fabrics that were once white but now showed yellowish stains from time, were the mortal remains of a woman. The bones were carefully arranged, and alongside them a small silver crucifix and several yellowed papers. Liam recoiled instinctively, horror overwhelming his senses. My God, what is this? Isabella approached calmly, as if the discovery were completely natural. It's Mrs. Eleonora. I told you she was here. How did you know? Liam's voice came out hoarse, laden with disbelief and fear. How could a 4-year-old child know that there was this here? Because she told me, Isabella replied simply, extending her small hand toward the papers. Can I get the letters? She wants you to read them. Liam hesitated, but something in the girl's serenity partially calmed him. With extreme care, he removed the documents from the chest, noticing they were surprisingly well preserved. The elegant handwriting on the first letter was clearly feminine, dated 1924. My dearest son Theodore, he read aloud, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally found the courage to open the sacred chest. What you have found here is not a cause for horror, but for pride. Eleonora Vance, my mother-in-law and the matriarch of this family, rests here according to our ancestral tradition. Liam stopped reading, the paper trembling in his hands. Ancestral tradition? What is she talking about? Isabella sat on the floor, watching him with infinite patience. Keep reading, Mr. Liam. The story needs to be told. He continued, his voice growing weaker. The Vance women do not die like ordinary people. They are preserved to protect our family and our businesses. Eleonora was the first, mummified according to ancient rituals we learned from the native peoples of these lands. Her spiritual presence is what guarantees our prosperity. The paper slipped from Liam's hands. All his life, he had questioned how a simple Oakhaven family had managed to accumulate so much wealth in such a short time. Now, faced with that macabre revelation, He began to understand that his fortune had roots far darker than he had imagined. "This is madness," he murmured. "My family can't have done this for generations, but they did," Isabella said softly, "and that's not the only thing they did." Before Liam could ask what she meant, the doorbell rang again. This time he recognized the sound. It was the specific pattern he used with Carmen Rivers, the municipal social worker who occasionally contacted him about company-related matters. "Stay here," he instructed Isabella, quickly covering the chest with a sheet. "Don't mention anything about this." Carmen was at the door, wearing her official coat and carrying a bulky folder. At 35, she had dedicated her entire professional career to difficult cases involving vulnerable children. Her expression was serious when Liam opened the door. "Good evening, Mr. Vance. I received an anonymous tip about a missing child who might be here." Liam's heart pounded. An anonymous tip? A girl of about 4, dark hair, answering to the name of Isabella Stone. "Have you seen her today?" Liam hesitated. Lying to a social worker was a serious offense, but something prevented him from handing Isabella over immediately. She showed up here during the storm. She's fine, just seeking shelter. May I see her?" When they returned to the hall, they found Isabella exactly where Liam had left her, but now she was holding another paper she had taken from the chest. Her eyes shone with a disturbing intensity. "Hello, Miss Carmen," the girl said, as if she had known the social worker for years. Carmen stopped abruptly. "How do you know my name?" "The same way I know your maiden name, Rivers Silver. And I know your grandfather, Jacob Silver, worked for the Vance family 50 years ago, until he was unjustly fired." Carmen's face turned completely pale. "That's impossible. You can't know that." Isabella smiled with a wisdom that didn't match her age. "I can know many things, Miss Carmen, including that you're not here just because of an anonymous tip." Liam watched the exchange between the two with growing unease. Secrets were being revealed that he didn't understand, connections between people who should be strangers. "What are you two talking about?" he asked. Carmen sighed deeply, like someone finally deciding to reveal a burden she had carried for years. "My grandfather used to tell stories about your family, Mr. Vance. Stories I always thought were just the fantasies of a man embittered by his dismissal." "What kind of stories?" "About strange rituals, about women in the family who disappeared but were never buried in the local cemeteries, about how the Vances always knew things they shouldn't, as if they had supernatural guidance." Isabella held up the paper she was holding. "This document explains all of it, Miss Carmen. Shall I read it?" Before either adult could answer, she began. "Confidential record, 1943. The property acquired by the Vance family in the Saints Creek region was built on sacred ground. The former inhabitants, forcibly removed, left warnings about consequences for those who desecrated their ancestral lands." Liam felt as if the floor was disappearing beneath his feet. Saints Creek. "That's where we built our first factory." "Exactly," Isabella continued. "And according to this document, your family always knew they were building on a Native American burial ground. More than that, they used this knowledge to blackmail local authorities for decades." Carmen drew closer, her expression a mixture of fascination and horror. "My grandfather talked about bones found during construction, about how your great-grandfather Theodore made the discoveries disappear in exchange for political favors." "That can't be true," Liam protested, but his voice sounded weak even to himself. "My family built an honest empire." "They built an empire," Isabella corrected, "but not an honest one. And Eleonora discovered all of this. That's why she had to be silenced. The silence that followed was heavy with tension." Liam looked at the covered chest, then at the girl who had arrived at his door like a storm, bringing revelations that destroyed everything he had ever believed in. "Who are you really, Isabella?" he finally asked. "How can a 4-year-old child know all these things?" The girl looked at him directly, and for a moment Liam had the impression he was looking at someone much older. "I am who the women buried on this property sent to tell the truth. And there is still much more to discover, Mr. Liam." Carmen took out her phone. "I need to make some calls. If what this child is saying is true, we have a much more complex situation than I imagined." "Wait," Liam said desperately. "You can't just—" But he didn't know how to finish the sentence. He couldn't ask them to hide evidence of crimes, but he also couldn't accept that his entire life had been built on lies and suffering. Isabella came closer to him and, to his surprise, held his hand gently. "Don't be afraid, Mr. Liam. The truth hurts at first, but then it sets you free, and you will need to be very brave for what is yet to come." Outside, the storm had ceased, but inside the Vance mansion, a much larger storm was just beginning. 3 days had passed since the discovery of the chest, and the Vance mansion had become the center of a quiet investigation that grew with each passing hour. Carmen had returned the next day, accompanied by Dr. Henry Moore, a forensic anthropologist from the State University specializing in indigenous issues and land conflicts. Liam watched from his study window as the experts carefully examined Eleonora's remains. Isabella remained by his side, but her presence had become increasingly unsettling. The girl spoke of events and people she shouldn't know, as if she had access to memories that weren't hers. "Mr. Liam," she said softly, "today you will find out something about your mother." He turned abruptly. "My mother. Delia died when I was a child. You can't know anything about her." "She didn't die," Isabella replied with the certainty that had become her trademark. "She was committed to St. Benedict's Asylum in Northwood. She's been there for 44 years. The words hit Liam like a physical blow. All his life, his father had told him that Delia had died in a car accident. He had even visited her grave in the municipal cemetery, bringing flowers every year on All Souls' Day. "That's a lie," he whispered. "I've seen the grave." "An empty grave," Isabella corrected. "Your mother discovered the truth about the family traditions when you were 8. She tried to tell the authorities, but no one believed her. So your father had her committed, claiming she had gone insane." At that moment, Carmen entered the study, carrying a bulky folder and a grave expression. "Mr. Vance, I need to speak with you urgently." "Is it about my mother?" he asked, still stunned by Isabella's revelations. Carmen paused, surprised. "How did you know? I just received the records from St. Benedict's Asylum. Delia Vance is alive and has been a patient there since 1980. Liam collapsed into the armchair, all the certainties of his life crumbling at once. "Why did my father lie to me all these years?" "Because she knew too much," Carmen said, opening the folder. "We also found birth records that contradict your official certificate. Liam, you were adopted when you were just 2 years old." The world seemed to stop completely. "Adopted?" "Your biological parents were Mary and Joseph Stone, employees at the Vance factory. According to documents we found, they publicly questioned some of the company's practices and were fired. Shortly after, they died in an accident that, well, the circumstances were questionable." Isabella gently held Liam's hand. "That's why you always felt different, Mr. Liam. Your heart knew the truth your mind couldn't accept." Dr. Moore appeared at the study door, interrupting the tense moment. "Mr. Vance, I need to show you something urgent. We've found evidence of other graves on the property. They went to the garden at the back of the mansion, where the anthropologist had used ground-penetrating radar to map the subsoil. The images showed at least 6 other anomalies, suggesting unofficial burials. Based on the analysis of Eleonora and the documents found, I believe these are other women from the family who went through the same process," Dr. Moore explained. Not just from the family, Isabella corrected, approaching a specific area of the garden. Mary Stone is buried here. Carmen and Liam exchanged shocked glances. Your biological mother? The social worker asked. And over there, Isabella continued, pointing to another spot, is Celia Rivers Silver. Carmen turned completely pale. Celia was my great-grandmother. She disappeared when my grandmother was a child. The family always thought she had abandoned her children. She didn't abandon them, Isabella said sadly. She discovered the Vances were using sacred native land to expand the factory without legal authorization. When she tried to report it, she was silenced. Dr. Moore was scribbling furiously in his notebook. That would explain why we never found official records for some of these people, if they were murdered to protect company secrets. Don't use that word, a harsh voice interrupted from behind them. They all turned to find Oscar Pace, the factory manager for 15 years and the son of a former supervisor. His eyes burned with barely contained anger as he approached the group. You're inventing slander against a respectable family, Oscar continued, and you, Liam, are allowing strangers to destroy the legacy your father built. My father didn't build anything, Liam replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. He stole, blackmailed, and worse. Oscar laughed bitterly. You were always naive, Liam. Do you think wealth is built with honesty? Your father did what was necessary to lift this family out of poverty. Necessary, Carmen repeated, outraged. Murdering people is necessary. People who threatened the livelihood of hundreds of families who depend on the factory, Oscar retorted. My own father told me about the problems that needed to be solved to keep the company running. Isabella approached Oscar with slow, deliberate steps. Your father is also buried here on the property, Mr. Pace. When he tried to get out of the conspiracy because his conscience couldn't take it anymore, the Vances did the same thing to him as they did to the others. Oscar's face contorted with rage. You're a disturbed child who should be in an institution, not making up absurd stories. They aren't stories, Dr. Moore said, showing his papers. I found records at the county office confirming irregularities in the land deeds. The Vance family really did acquire native lands through forged documentation. Oscar took a few steps back, realizing his defenses were crumbling. Even if that's true, it was decades ago. You can't destroy the lives of dozens of families because of past mistakes. They weren't mistakes, Isabella said firmly. They were choices, and the consequences of those choices continue to this day. Carmen checked her phone, which had buzzed with an urgent message. I just received confirmation from the psychiatric hospital. Delia Vance is lucid and willing to talk. She has been keeping evidence for 4 decades, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Liam felt a mixture of relief and terror. He would finally meet his adoptive mother, but he would also have to face truths that could be even more devastating than those he had already discovered. When can we go see her? He asked. Right now, if you want. She said there's something urgent she needs to tell you before it's too late. Oscar took a few more steps back, his expression becoming increasingly desperate. You don't know what you're doing. There are powerful people involved in this story, people who won't allow their secrets to be exposed. What people? Dr. Moore asked. The mayor, the county judge, 2 state representatives. They all benefited from the land scheme. If you keep digging into this, it won't just be the Vance family that falls. Isabella looked directly at Oscar with an expression mixing pity and determination. The truth must be told, Mr. Pace. The women buried in this land will not have peace until their stories are known. As she spoke, the wind began to blow stronger, rustling the trees in the garden almost ritually. Dr. Moore noticed something strange in the behavior of the local birds, which had gathered in large flocks around the area where Isabella had indicated the graves. We need to leave for Northwood immediately, Carmen said. I have a feeling time is running out for us to uncover the whole truth. St. Benedict's Asylum stood like a white fortress against the cloudy northward sky. Liam held Isabella's hand tightly as they walked through the corridors that smelled of disinfectant and abandoned hopes. 44 years had passed since he had last seen his adoptive mother, when he was just a confused child before a coffin he now knew was empty. Delia Vance was sitting by her bedroom window, watching the inner garden with eyes that carried decades of secrets. At 72, she maintained a crystalline lucidity that contrasted with the environment where she had been held prisoner for so long. "Liam," she said softly, turning as he entered, "I knew this day would come. And you brought the child." Isabella approached without hesitation, as if she had known Delia for years. "Mrs. Delia, the women buried on the property asked me to come. They want you to tell the whole truth." Delia smiled sadly. "So you really can hear them. I could too when I was younger. That's why why Theodore locked me in here." Carmen, who had accompanied the group, prepared her recorder. "Mrs. Delia, are you willing to give an official statement about the events that led to your institutionalization?" "More than willing," she replied, moving to a locked drawer. "I've waited 44 years for this opportunity." From the drawer, Delia removed a rusty metal box filled with documents, photographs, and small objects. "For all these years, I pretended to be crazy so the nurses wouldn't suspect I was collecting evidence. Every visit from Theodore, every careless conversation from the doctors he bribed, every piece of paper I managed to hide. It's all here." Liam approached the box with reverence. "Mother, why did Father do this to you?" "Because I found out he wasn't really a Vance," Delia revealed, pulling out a yellowed birth certificate. "Theodore was the illegitimate son of a family employee, adopted as a child to maintain the bloodline. And more importantly, I discovered he was continuing traditions that came from long before the Vances arrived in Oakhaven." Dr. Moore, who had remained silent, leaned in to examine the documents. "Traditions? Related to the funerary rituals?" "They weren't funerary rituals," Delia corrected, her voice carrying decades of repressed horror. "They were systematic murders to silence anyone who questioned the origin of the family's lands. And Eleonora was not a Vance. The silence in the room was absolute." Isabella held Delia's hand encouragingly, like an old friend offering support. "Eleonora was a Native American medicine woman," Delia continued, "the spiritual leader of the people who lived on the lands where the factory now stands. When the real Vances arrived in 1890, they didn't buy the lands. They kidnapped Eleonora, forced her to marry the patriarch, and used that as a legal pretext to appropriate the entire territory." Carmen periodically stopped writing, shocked by the magnitude of the revelations. "And the other women buried on the property, descendants of Eleonora who tried to reclaim their ancestral lands over the years. Mary Stone, Liam's biological mother, was Eleonora's granddaughter. That's why she and her husband were killed. Not for questioning company practices, but because they had a legal right to the lands. Liam felt as if he were crumbling from the inside. "So I am also a descendant of Eleonora." "You are her last direct descendant," Delia confirmed, "and according to the native laws that were still valid when Eleonora was kidnapped, you are the true owner of all the lands the Vance family claims." Isabella spoke for the first time since they had entered the room. "That's why Mrs. Eleonora brought me to you. She knew only you could right the wrongs of the past. But there's more," Delia said, taking photographs from the box. "Theodore documented everything. He was obsessed with keeping records, thinking he might one day need to prove he was just protecting the family's assets. The photographs showed scenes none of them were prepared to see, macabre rituals where women were mummified alive, secret burials in the middle of the night, meetings between Theodore and local officials where money changed hands." "My God," Dr. Moore whispered. This is evidence of a systematic genocide that lasted for over a century, and which continues to this day, Delia added bitterly. Oscar Pace isn't just the factory manager, he's the grandson of one of the original murderers, and he has continued to eliminate anyone who gets close to the truth. As if invoked by her words, Carmen's cell phone rang urgently. The social worker answered with a worried expression that quickly turned to panic. Dr. Moore has been threatened, she said, hanging up. Men showed up at the mansion demanding he stop the investigation and hand over all the evidence. They can't stop us now, Isabella said with a determination surprising for a 4-year-old. All the buried women are with me. They won't allow themselves to be silenced again. Delia stood up, moving with renewed energy. There's something else you need to know. Liam, you have a sister. The world stopped again. A sister? Mary Stone was pregnant when she was murdered. The doctors managed to save the baby. Theodore gave her up for adoption in another city, but I found out where she ended up. Carmen looked at Delia with growing disbelief. Where? Carmen, Delia said softly, you are the daughter of Rita Stone, who was adopted at 6 months by a family in a neighboring state. Rita Stone was the daughter of Mary Stone. The silence that followed was deafening. Carmen and Liam looked at each other, slowly processing the revelation that they were cousins, united by blood and the tragedy that had marked their families. That's why you always felt compelled to help, Liam, Isabella said gently. Your heart knew the connection your mind couldn't comprehend. At that moment, Dr. Moore burst into the room, breathless and panicked. We need to get out of here immediately. Oscar has convinced some local authorities that we're fabricating evidence. There's an arrest warrant being issued. We're not going anywhere, Delia said firmly. 44 years in hiding is enough. Isabella went to the window and, to everyone's surprise, began to sing an ancient melody in a language none of them recognized. Within minutes, the asylum's garden began to fill with people, native people from various tribes in the region, human rights activists, journalists Delia had secretly contacted over the years. How did she do that? Liam asked, amazed. The indigenous communication networks are far more efficient than any modern technology, Delia explained. I sent messages through allies I cultivated for decades. When it was time to act, they would be ready. The leader of the approaching group was an elderly man named Chief Tala, from a tribe that had lost its lands to the Vances 70 years ago. He embraced Isabella as if she were his own granddaughter. The spirit child has finally brought you to us, he said in accented English. Now we can honor our ancestors and reclaim what has always been ours. In the months that followed, the investigation uncovered a web of corruption and murder that extended far beyond the Vance family. Oscar and his accomplices were arrested, the lands were returned to the native tribes, and Liam decided to use his entire personal fortune to create a historical reparations fund. Isabella, who revealed herself to be a perfectly normal child once her mission was accomplished, was officially adopted by Liam and Carmen, who discovered that their family connection was just the beginning of a genuine love that grew between them. Delia left the asylum to live her final years in freedom, surrounded by the family that had finally found peace. And on the site where the factory built on bones and lies once stood, a Native American cultural center now flourished, where the stories of the silenced women were told and honored every day. Eleonora and her spiritual sisters could finally rest. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.